The city never sleeps, they say. But tonight it felt like it had been waiting just for me. The neon lights outside flickered like distant promises, and I could feel their pulse in my own chest. Every step I took toward the restaurant was deliberate, measured. Every click of my heels against the marble echoed in my mind, louder than the laughter and chatter surrounding me. I told myself I was ready. I told myself I had survived worse. But the truth was, tonight wasn't just another night. Tonight felt like a reckoning. Damien would be here. I knew it. I could feel it like a shadow brushing against my skin. A cold whisper reminding me of the fear I thought I had buried. He had always been the kind of man who thrived on control, on breaking people down until they were nothing but a reflection of his cruelty. And for years, I had let him define me, trap me inside the cage of his words, his insults, his hands that were never gentle. But not anymore. Not tonight. As I stepped through the glass doors, the air inside smelled faintly of expensive wine and polished wood. Guests in designer outfits murmured and turned toward me, though I didn't need their attention. I didn't need their validation. I needed to see him, just once, to remind myself how far I had come. And there he was, Damien. His presence was a sharp blade in the middle of the room, smug and certain, like he already owned this space. He leaned back, eyes scanning the room, lips curving into a self-satisfied smirk. I could almost hear the words forming in his mind. She's here. She can't escape me now. I walked past the tables, past the whispers, past the judgment. I felt their eyes like tiny knives, but I refused to flinch. I refused to let fear twist my spine. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head, each time imagining the control slipping from his hands. I had pictured the exact way I would stand tall, the way I would let my voice remain steady, calm, untouchable. And now, every rehearsal was finally real. He noticed me, of course. He always did. His eyes flickered with recognition, with that dark flash of anger that I used to feel like a noose tightening around my neck. But I wasn't the same girl who had trembled at his words, the same girl who had bent under his presence. I was stronger. I had learned how to turn my fear into fuel, how to make it carve a path straight through his arrogance. I could hear him whispering under his breath to someone, a plan forming, a trap ready to spring. He wanted to humiliate me, to show everyone here that I was nothing, that I had always been nothing. But what he didn't know, what he could never know until it was too late, was that I wasn't alone. Not tonight. Not anymore. I stopped at my table, chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm, head held high, and let my gaze sweep the room. And there in the corner, waiting like a storm contained in human form, was Alessandro Moretti. He didn't need to speak. He didn't need to move. His presence alone was a promise, a warning, a shield. And in that instant, everything shifted. Damien's smirk faltered. The air changed. The whispers died, replaced by a tension so thick it could choke. He realized, probably too late, that this wasn't the same powerless girl he had tormented. This was someone different, someone untouchable, someone protected by a force he couldn't even begin to comprehend. I sat down, letting a quiet, victorious calm settle over me. I didn't smile, not yet. Not because I was afraid to, but because I knew what was coming next. The reckoning wouldn't be immediate. It never is. It comes slow. It comes deliberate. It comes in the subtle collapse of arrogance, and the silent acknowledgement that power is no longer in their hands. Tonight, he would remember me. He would remember every word he ever spoke, every hand that ever tried to push me down, and he would understand finally that I had survived. And more than that, I had thrived. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just existing. I was standing, I was seen, and I was untouchable. They say the past has a way of showing up when you least expect it. But Damien, he was never unpredictable. He was the kind of man who lived for control, and when control slipped through his fingers, he turned cruel. As I sat there, his gaze burned across the room, trying to pierce through the wall of calm I'd built. Once upon a time, it might have worked. He used to know how to break me with a single look, but not anymore. Now his stare was powerless, because sitting only a few feet away from me was the one man even Damien wouldn't dare cross, Alessandro Moretti, the man whose name carried the weight of both respect and fear. I could feel Alessandro's presence without even looking at him. It was a quiet storm, calm on the surface, dangerous underneath. His silence spoke louder than Damien's words ever could, and for the first time, I understood what real protection felt like. Not the kind that cages you, the kind that stands between you and the fire, and dares the flames to come closer. Damien rose from his table, every eye following his movement. He straightened his jacket, that same arrogance dripping from him like poison. He approached, slow, deliberate, pretending it was casual. But I knew him too well. Every step he took was a game, a performance meant to make me flinch. Only this time the audience wasn't on his side. "Sophia," he said, voice smooth but sharp around the edges. "Didn't expect to see you here. Guess you're still chasing men above your league, huh?" Once, that voice had the power to shrink me. Now it just sounded small. I looked at him calm and steady. "Funny," I said softly. "I was thinking the same thing about you." The crowd around us stirred. A low, collective gasp. Damien's smile faltered for the briefest second. He wasn't used to me fighting back. He wasn't used to me not breaking. I could see his mind racing, trying to regain footing. "Who's got your back this time?" he sneered. "Another fool you've fooled?" And then, before I could even respond, I felt it. The air shifted. A shadow moved. Alessandro stood. He didn't say a word at first. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to silence the entire room. Every whisper died. Every gaze turned. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, deep, and calm. Too calm. "She doesn't need to fool anyone," he said. "But you should learn when to stop talking." Damien froze. He tried to laugh it off, but it came out nervous, fractured. "I don't know who you think you are." Alessandro stepped closer, eyes never leaving his. "I know exactly who I am," he said. "The question is, do you know who you're talking to?" The silence that followed was the kind that cracked through nerves. The kind that made even the walls listen. And in that moment, I saw something I never thought I'd see in Damien. Fear. Real fear. He swallowed hard, glancing at the men in dark suits near the entrance. Alessandro's men, always watching, always ready. He realized then that this wasn't his stage anymore. The power had shifted, and the woman he used to break now had someone beside her who would burn the world before letting him try again. I didn't need to say anything. My silence spoke volumes. The woman he once controlled no longer existed. Alessandro turned slightly toward me, his voice quieter now, meant only for my ears. "Are you all right?" I nodded, slow and sure. It wasn't weakness. It was peace. For the first time in years, I felt safe. And in that safety, I rediscovered the woman I had been before Damien's darkness found me. As Damien backed away, I could almost see the weight of realization crash down on him. The humiliation, the defeat, the loss of power. It was all there in his trembling hands. People would talk about tonight. They would talk about the way the Mafia boss stood for a woman no one had dared protect. They would whisper about how she looked him in the eyes and never blinked. And they would remember how the man who once ruled her walked away in silence. That night, the tables finally turned. And for the first time, Damien wasn't the one writing the story. He was the cautionary tale. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just stands quietly beside you and makes the monsters disappear. When the noise fades, the silence becomes deafening. And after Damien left, that's exactly what it felt like. Silence. Heavy, electric, alive. I sat there for a moment, still, as if moving would somehow break the spell that had just been cast. It was strange, really. For so long, I had dreamed of this, of standing up to him, of watching him finally taste the humiliation he had once served me. But when it happened, there was no triumph, just quiet, just release. I watched Damien's back disappear through the doors, and something inside me exhaled for the first time in years. The kind of breath you don't even realize you've been holding until it finally leaves your body. Alessandro hadn't said another word. He just stood there, watching, waiting. Not like a man who needed to control the moment, but like one who already owned it. He moved closer, slow and deliberate, his gaze softening as he looked at me. Most men stared at me with either pity or desire. He didn't. He looked at me like I was something seen for the first time, something worth defending. "Are you sure? You're okay?" he asked, his voice deep but quiet, almost careful. I nodded, though the truth was harder to explain. "I'm not sure what I am," I admitted, "but I'm not afraid anymore." And somehow, that felt like everything. He took a seat across from me, his movements calm, controlled. The tension in the room had shifted. People pretended to look away, but I could still feel their eyes, their curiosity. They wanted to know who I was. the woman who stood beside him, and I couldn't blame them. For years I had lived in Damien's shadow. Now I was sitting across from a man who was the shadow, the kind that could swallow light whole. I should apologize, Alessandro said after a moment. I don't usually interfere in other people's business. I tilted my head, curious. But you did tonight. He smiled faintly, a dangerous kind of softness in his expression. I did. Because he looked at you like you were his property. The way he said it, calm, factual, but edged with quiet fury, made my pulse quicken. No man had ever defended me like that. Not without expecting something in return. I met his gaze, steady. You didn't have to do that. No, he said. But I wanted to. There was no arrogance in his tone. No performance, just truth. And in that truth, I felt something unfamiliar, safety. I looked down at my hands, realizing they were trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer gravity of it all. For so long I had been invisible. Now, someone powerful had seen me, and not as a victim, not as someone broken, but as someone worth standing beside. He noticed the shake in my fingers and reached across the table, his hand brushing lightly against mine. It wasn't possessive. It wasn't pity. It was grounding, real, human, almost tender. Breathe, he said quietly. I did. And it felt different this time. Like the air itself was new. The restaurant had started to move again. Music returning, whispers fading into laughter. But inside that moment, the world had shrunk to just us. He leaned back slightly, his eyes never leaving mine. You don't owe me anything, Sophia, he said. But if that man ever touches your life again, he disappears. Understood? His words weren't a threat. They were a promise. And the terrifying part was, I believed him. I could have been scared of him, of his world, of what he represented. But instead, I felt something else rising inside me. Trust. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was reckless. But it was real. For years I had been haunted by Damien's voice in my head. His cruel laughter, his sharp words, his control. And now, one sentence from Alessandro had erased it all. As we left the restaurant together, the night air was cold and sharp, biting at my skin. But I felt warm, because for the first time in forever, I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking toward something dangerous, something intoxicating, something that felt a lot like freedom, dressed in the shape of a man the world called the Mafia boss. Sometimes protection doesn't come wrapped in kindness. Sometimes it comes cloaked in danger. And somehow, you feel safer there than you ever did in love. There's something strange about silence after chaos. It doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like the air itself is waiting to see what you'll do next. The city outside hummed in the distance. Car horns, sirens, laughter spilling from the streets of downtown. Yet beside him, walking through that quiet parking lot, it felt like the world had gone still. I didn't speak at first. Neither did he. Maybe because we didn't need to. Maybe because there was something in the way he looked at me. Not with pity, not with curiosity, but with understanding. He opened the door to his car, a black Maserati that seemed to match his entire existence. Sleek, dangerous, expensive, untouchable. But it wasn't the car that intimidated me. It was him. The way he carried power like a second skin. Effortless. Silent. Certain. Where do you live? He asked quietly. Upper West Side, I said, still half distracted by the rhythm of his voice. Then I'll take you home. I hesitated. Old habits don't die easily. Trust wasn't something I gave freely anymore. Not after Damien. But something in Alessandro's tone left no room for fear. He wasn't asking. He was assuring. I got in. For a few moments, there was nothing but the low hum of the engine and the city lights blurring past the windows. My reflection stared back at me. The same face, but different eyes. Calmer. Freer. And beside me, this man, this stranger, sat like a storm I didn't want to escape. You're not afraid of me, he said finally, his voice breaking the quiet. It wasn't a question. I glanced at him. Should I be? He smiled faintly, a shadow of amusement passing over his features. Most people are. Then maybe I'm not like most people. His eyes flicked toward me, a hint of surprise there. I can see that. The way he said it, low, deliberate, made my heartbeat stumble. He wasn't flirting. He wasn't performing. He was observing, like a man who'd built his life studying people, reading what they never said out loud. I looked back out the window, unsure of what to do with the silence that followed. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy in a different way, like something was beginning, even if neither of us knew what it was. Finally, I spoke. You didn't have to help me tonight. He didn't look at me when he answered. I know. So why did you? For a long moment, he didn't speak, then softly, because no one else did. That hit deeper than I expected. He didn't know my story, not really, but somehow those words slipped right through the cracks in my armor. And for a man who looked like he'd built walls higher than mine, it felt like he understood. The rest of the drive was quiet again, but the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full, charged, like the air between two storms just before they collide. When the car finally stopped outside my building, I turned toward him. Thank you, I said, and meant it more than I'd ever meant those words before. He didn't move for a moment, just studied my face with that same calm intensity that made it hard to breathe. Get some rest, he said. And if he ever shows up again, call this number. He handed me a small black card, just a phone number. No name, no logo. But I didn't need one to know who it belonged to. I took it carefully, my fingers brushing his. It was a small thing, barely a second of contact. But it felt like something shifted in the universe, for the first time since my world had fallen apart. I felt safe, not because of who he was, but because of how he looked at me. I wasn't a problem to be solved. I was someone worth saving. As I stepped out, the night air hit my skin again, cool and sharp. He didn't drive away immediately. He waited, silent, watching, until I was inside. And even then, long after the sound of his car faded into the distance, the feeling didn't leave me. That strange, dangerous calm, that sense of being seen, not just watched. I knew I should have been afraid of him. Men like him didn't just protect. They owned, they controlled, they destroyed. But somehow, deep down, I knew he wasn't like the others, because Alessandro Moretti didn't save me to claim me. He saved me because, for reasons I couldn't yet understand, he saw me. Maybe fate doesn't always come softly. Sometimes it arrives in a black car, with quiet eyes and promises you never asked for, but somehow, always needed. Morning came slow, the kind of morning that feels unreal, like the night before was just a dream you're not ready to wake from. The city outside my window was already alive. Sirens in the distance, coffee shops opening, the hum of a world that never pauses. But for once, I wasn't rushing to keep up with it. I sat on the edge of my bed, the light spilling across the floor in soft golden stripes, and tried to understand the storm still lingering inside me. Last night, something shifted. Not just in the way Damien looked at me, broken, powerless, but in the way I looked at myself. I wasn't the same woman who used to cry herself to sleep, asking why love had to hurt. I wasn't the same woman who kept apologizing for breathing too loud, for existing too much. No, that version of me had died a long time ago. But what replaced her? That's what scared me. My fingers brushed the small black card on the nightstand, the one Alessandro had given me. It looked so simple, just a number, but it carried weight, power. Like a door I wasn't sure I was ready to open. I picked it up anyway, tracing the edges like it might whisper something back. Call this number, he'd said. He hadn't said if, he'd said when. There was something in his voice that night, something that lingered long after he drove away. It wasn't just protection, it was connection, dangerous, unspoken, unavoidable. I made myself coffee, trying to shake it off. The way he'd looked at me, like he was memorizing the parts of me I thought were invisible. But no matter how many sips I took, the taste of his voice, his calm, stayed. I glanced at my reflection in the kitchen window. Same face, same eyes. But there was something new now, a quiet strength, a spark that hadn't been there before. And still, underneath it all, fear. Not of Damien, not anymore. but of what comes next. Because when a man like Alessandro Moretti steps into your life, you don't just walk away untouched. You get rewritten. I tried to lose myself in my morning routine, calls, emails, small things that once felt important. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart stuttered, half hoping it was him. Ridiculous, I know. We'd spoken for barely an hour, and yet somehow, he lingered in every thought that crossed my mind. There was something magnetic about him. The way power seemed effortless, like he didn't need to prove it to anyone. He didn't demand control. It just followed him. And that scared me more than Damien ever had. Because Alessandro's power wasn't cruel. It was quiet. It made you want to trust it, and I did, even though I knew better. By noon, I still hadn't left my apartment. Every time I looked at the door, my chest tightened. Not from fear of going out, but from the possibility of running into the past again. Damien was gone, yes. But men like him didn't disappear. They waited. They plotted. And the thought made my hand tighten around the black card once more. I told myself I wouldn't call, that I didn't need to, but my thumb hovered over the digits anyway. It wasn't about needing help. It was about wanting to hear his voice again. I pressed the card to my chest and whispered to the empty room, "What are you doing to me, Alessandro Moretti?" The sound of my own voice startled me, because I wasn't supposed to care. He was danger wrapped in elegance. And yet, deep down, something about him felt inevitable, like he'd appeared exactly when my story demanded him to. As the day slipped into evening, I finally placed the card back down. Not in a drawer, not hidden, right there on the table, in plain sight. Because no matter how much I tried to pretend otherwise, I knew the truth. I was going to call him. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon, and when I did, everything would change again. It's strange, isn't it? The way danger can feel like safety, and the way the one person you should run from becomes the only one you want to run toward. It started with a heartbeat. Mine. Too fast. Too loud, echoing in the stillness of my apartment like it was trying to warn me. Or dare me. The black card sat on the counter, catching the light from the setting sun. It was just paper, just numbers. But it felt alive. All day I'd told myself I wouldn't call him. That I didn't need him. That last night was an exception. Not the start of something. But the truth was, ever since Alessandro Moretti stepped into my world, it hadn't stopped spinning. I stared at the card again. My fingers brushed it once, twice before I finally picked it up. Every instinct told me not to. Every wound told me not to trust. But curiosity, that soft, dangerous thing, whispered otherwise. I dialed the number. 1 ring. 2. 3. Then, Moretti, just his voice. Calm. Deep. And suddenly, the air in the room changed. I swallowed, unsure what to say. "It's Sophia," a pause. A quiet shift in tone. I know. Those 2 words, simple, certain, wrapped around me like silk and steel. "I wasn't sure if I should call," I said softly. "I was," he replied. It wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. And in that moment, I hated how much it steadied me. "Are you safe?" he asked. "Yes, I think so." "You think so?" His voice dropped an octave, that low warning edge that made the rest of the world fade. I closed my eyes. "Damien hasn't shown up, but I keep expecting him to." "Good," Alessandro said. "Expectation keeps you alive. Fear keeps you aware, but don't let it own you." I wanted to ask how he knew that. How he spoke about fear like someone who'd made peace with it. But I didn't call for help, I said finally. I just wanted to say thank you. Another pause. "You already did, for everything," I added, "for stepping in, for not letting him—" "Don't thank me for something I couldn't ignore," he interrupted, voice low, almost rough. "Men like him don't stop unless someone teaches them consequences." There it was again, that mix of darkness and conviction that made him who he was. A man with his own kind of justice. A man who didn't play by anyone's rules but his own. The silence between us stretched, not awkward, just heavy. And then, unexpectedly, he said, "Have you eaten?" The question caught me off guard. "What?" "Dinner," he said simply. "It's late. You should eat." I let out a small laugh, the first genuine one in weeks. "You're giving me life advice now?" He didn't laugh, but I could hear the ghost of a smile in his tone. Maybe I'm giving myself an excuse. For what? "To see you again." My heart skipped. "You don't need an excuse, Alessandro." The way his name left my lips startled me. Soft, intimate, dangerous. He must have felt it too, because the next thing he said came quieter. "I'll pick you up in an hour." "Wait," I started. "You don't have to." But the line went dead. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at my phone. No goodbye, no confirmation, just him, commanding, unapologetic. Like he'd stepped into my life and decided he wasn't leaving. Part of me wanted to resist it, to draw lines, build walls, stay safe. But another part, the one that remembered what it felt like to be seen, wanted to see him again. An hour later, the sound of an engine cut through the quiet. I looked out the window. There it was, that black Maserati. And there he was, leaning against it, a silhouette against the amber glow of the city lights. He didn't call. Didn't text. He just showed up. And somehow, that said more than words ever could. I stared at my reflection in the mirror one last time. Same woman, new story. And this time, I was walking into it by choice. I grabbed my coat, slipped the card into my purse, and whispered to myself before stepping out the door, "This isn't just a dinner." No, it wasn't. This was the beginning of something I couldn't name yet. Something dangerous and magnetic. Something that scared me in all the right ways. Sometimes the call you shouldn't make becomes the one that changes everything. Because fate doesn't always knock. Sometimes it answers. When I stepped outside, the night air felt different. Heavier, almost electric. The city was still alive, humming under the glow of streetlights and distant sirens. But it wasn't the noise that caught my breath. It was him. Alessandro Moretti stood by his car like he owned the night. A black suit, no tie, just confidence wrapped in silence. He looked up when he saw me, and for a heartbeat the world forgot how to move. He opened the door for me without a word. His cologne lingered, something dark, expensive, with a trace of smoke. The kind of scent that didn't just cling, it claimed. Inside, the Maserati purred to life, low and smooth, as if it too knew who it belonged to. We didn't speak at first. But we didn't need to. There was something in the air, a language between two people who had both learned to survive. After a while, he said quietly, "You look different tonight." I turned to him. "Different how?" He glanced at me, eyes flickering with something unreadable. "Like you finally remember who you are." I didn't reply, because for the first time in a long time, I think he was right. We drove in silence through winding streets, until the car stopped in front of a place that didn't even have a sign. Just tall iron gates, and warm light spilling through glass walls. It wasn't a restaurant for the public. It was private, exclusive, his kind of world. The moment we walked in, people moved, subtly, respectfully. No words. Just quiet acknowledgments that he was someone not to be questioned. He guided me to a secluded table in the back. White linen, a single candle, and a view of the city that felt endless. I looked at him as he poured wine. Calm, deliberate, precise. He didn't ask what I wanted. He already knew. It should have bothered me. It didn't. When the waiter left, Alessandro leaned back slightly, his eyes on me. "You still haven't asked why I brought you here." I met his gaze. "Maybe I don't need to." He smiled, small, knowing, dangerous. "Good, because I don't do casual dinners, Sophia. Not with people who matter." My pulse quickened. "And I matter?" He tilted his head. "You're the first person in a long time who's looked at me and didn't flinch." I didn't know what to say to that. Because part of me had flinched. Just not where he could see it. He studied me for a moment, then said softly, "Damien took your peace. Don't let him keep it." The words hit harder than I expected, because no one had ever said them out loud before, not even me. I looked down at my glass. "It's not that easy." "It never is," he said. "But that's what makes it worth taking back." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was alive. The kind that holds two people in a moment neither of them saw coming. Dinner arrived, but I couldn't taste it. Not with the way he looked at me. Like he saw everything I'd tried to hide. The fear, the strength, the fragile courage underneath. After a while, he leaned forward. "Tell me something true," he said. "About what?" "About you," I hesitated. Then said quietly, "I used to think love was supposed to hurt. That if it didn't break you, it wasn't real." He didn't react right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost tender. "And now?" "Now," I said, meeting his eyes. "I'm not sure I believe in it at all." He held my gaze for a long time, until it felt like he was searching for something I didn't even know I'd lost. Then, finally, he said, Maybe you just haven't seen what it looks like when it's not trying to destroy you. Something inside me shifted. Slow, quiet, but real. Because for the first time, I didn't feel broken. I felt seen. As we left the restaurant, the night had grown colder, quieter. But when he placed his hand on the small of my back, light, protective, I didn't flinch. Not from fear, from recognition. Because maybe this was what safety felt like. Not silence, not walls, but someone who stood close enough to guard you, and far enough to let you breathe. Some dinners feed the body, others awaken the soul. And sometimes the person across the table isn't a danger, but the reason you finally stop running. By morning, the city had already decided what kind of story it wanted to tell. And like all good lies, it started with a truth. A single photo, blurry, grainy, but clear enough to ruin everything. Me, sitting across from Alessandro Moretti, his hand over mine. That look, the kind that says this isn't business. The image spread faster than I could breathe. Gossip sites, social feeds. Even the whispers in the cafe downstairs carried my name. Sofia Russo, they said. With him. I should have been used to humiliation by now. Damien had trained me well for that. But this was different. This wasn't shame. It was exposure. And exposure meant danger. The phone rang before I could silence it. Unknown number. But I already knew who it was. Still playing the part? Damien's voice slid through the line like poison. Moving up in the world, huh? Mafia money now? My fingers tightened around the phone. What do you want, Damien? To remind you who you really are. He laughed. Low, cruel, familiar. Trash dressed in silk is still trash. I should have hung up. But my silence only fed him. You think he'll keep you when he finds out what you did? He sneered. You think he won't see what I saw? A woman desperate enough to sell her pride for protection? My throat burned. You don't know anything about him. Oh, I know men like him, he said. And they all want the same thing. Control. For a heartbeat, I wanted to believe he was wrong. But the truth was, he'd planted a seed. And fear has a way of growing fast. By the time I reached the window, black cars were already outside. Not his, not Alessandro's, Damien's men. He wasn't threatening anymore. He was moving. I didn't think. I just called the one number I wasn't supposed to. He answered on the first ring. Sophia? My voice shook. He's here. He knows. Where are you? Home. Stay there, Alessandro said, voice sharp, controlled. Do not open the door. The line went dead, again. But this time it wasn't silence. It was a promise. I moved away from the window. Heart pounding. The sound of a car engine. Doors slamming. Then footsteps. 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate, like someone enjoying the wait. Sophia, Damien's voice called from the hall. Be a good girl. Let's talk. I froze. You can't hide behind him forever, he said. He's not your savior. But then another sound, one that made everything inside me go still. Engines, louder, closer. And then, silence. When I dared to look out the window again, I saw them. Alessandro's men. A wall of black suits, silent and ready, and behind them, him. Alessandro stepped out of the car like a shadow in daylight. No hurry, no fear, just quiet, controlled danger. He looked up once, straight at my window, and even from that distance I felt it. That command, that calm, that unspoken, you're safe now. The next few seconds blurred into chaos, shouting, slamming, the sharp echo of control being ripped away. Then silence again. The kind that only follows when power has shifted hands. When the door finally opened, it wasn't Damien who stood there. It was Alessandro. He didn't speak. He just looked at me. Eyes dark, jaw tight, breathing steady. And behind that stillness, something dangerous flickered. Possessiveness. Protection. He stepped closer. Did he touch you? I shook my head. No. His hand brushed my arm, a silent check. A reassurance. But his voice was ice. He won't again. For the first time, I believed it. The fear that had lived in my chest for years started to fade. Not because I was no longer in danger, but because I wasn't alone in it anymore. That night, Alessandro didn't leave. He didn't ask permission. He stayed, and as I sat across from him, in the dim quiet of my apartment, I realized something terrifying and true. It wasn't just safety I was drawn to anymore. It was him. The calm, the fire, the way his silence spoke louder than any man's promises ever had. Sometimes the storm doesn't destroy you. It reveals who's willing to walk through it beside you. And when the world turns against you, the one who stands still is the one you never forget. I used to think safety meant distance. Locks, walls, silence thick enough to hide inside. But that night, as the city lights smeared across the rain-streaked window of his car, I learned safety could sound different, like an engine humming low beneath a man who never asked permission to protect you. We didn't speak on the drive. His hands on the wheel were steady, veins shifting beneath the cuff of his shirt, the only sign of the storm still burning under his calm. Every so often, his eyes flicked toward me, checking, measuring, making sure I was still breathing. When we reached the gates, they opened before we even stopped. No passwords, no questions, just recognition. The Moretti estate wasn't a house. It was a fortress carved into the hillside, glass and stone and shadows. Men moved silently along the perimeter, all dressed in black, all carrying the weight of loyalty. He led me through the grand hall, our footsteps echoing against marble that caught the moonlight like silver. I'd seen power before, Damien's kind, built on fear and control. But this was order, quiet, absolute, terrifying in its discipline. Stay here for a few days, Alessandro said finally, turning toward me, until I'm certain he's done trying. I can't stay here. My voice sounded small in that vast space. People will talk. Let them. He took a step closer, his tone soft but immovable. I don't answer to gossip. I should have argued. Instead, I found myself nodding. He gestured toward a curved staircase. Your room is upstairs, second door on the left. Rosa will bring you clothes, whatever you need. Rosa? My housekeeper, he said, the edge of a smile ghosting his lips. And occasionally my conscience. That made me laugh, quiet, nervous, real. And for a heartbeat, his expression softened. When I finally reached the room, I expected luxury, and found peace instead. Soft light, clean lines, curtains swaying with the sea breeze, a place built for someone who needed silence more than decoration. I closed the door, leaning against it, trying to steady my pulse. Somewhere below, I could hear him speaking in Italian, low, controlled, giving orders I didn't understand but somehow trusted completely. For the first time in years, I slept without fear clawing at the edges of my dreams. Morning came in quiet gold. When I stepped into the kitchen, Alessandro was already there, sleeves rolled, coffee steaming between his hands. No suit, no armor, just a man, impossibly calm. He looked up. You should eat. You always start conversations with instructions, I teased. He arched a brow. Only when they keep people alive. Something about the way he said it made me want to sit down, so I did. The silence between us was comfortable now, warm, deliberate. After a moment, I asked, Why are you doing this? Protecting me? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he poured another cup and placed it in front of me. Then finally, because someone should have. The words landed deeper than I expected. And before I could stop myself, I whispered, And what if helping me puts you in danger? His gaze lifted, steady and sure. Then it means I chose right. There was no bravado in it. No performance, just truth. And that scared me more than any threat ever had. Later that day, I wandered outside. The ocean stretched endless beyond the cliffs. The wind sharp, clean. I didn't hear him approach, but I felt that quiet shift in the air that only happened when he was near. He stopped beside me, hands in his pockets. Still thinking about leaving? Should I? He turned slightly, eyes on the horizon. If you're asking permission, you already know the answer. I smiled despite myself. You always this cryptic? Only when honesty feels too dangerous. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Just waves, wind, the hum of something unspoken rising between us. And then he said softly, He won't touch you again. Sophia, that's a promise. I looked at him then, really looked, and realized I wasn't just safe. I was seen, and that somehow was far more dangerous. Some cages look like protection. Some walls look like rescue. But sometimes the safest place you'll ever stand is right beside the man everyone else is afraid of. I'd imagined monsters before. They'd always had faces like Damien's, smirks that cut, eyes that promised pain. But monsters don't always snarl. Some sip espresso at sunrise and speak softly in Italian. Alessandro did both. That morning the house was still, except for voices drifting from below. Men talking, measured, low, efficient. I followed the sound to the study and stopped in the doorway. He was standing by the window, sunlight catching the edge of his jaw, phone pressed to his ear. I said clean it up, he murmured. Then silence. Then colder. No witnesses. The line clicked dead. He turned, saw me, and in one breath, the man who'd made coffee for me at dawn vanished, replaced by the one the city whispered about. For a second, neither of us moved. He just watched me, trying to decide if he should explain. I beat him to it. Was that about Damien? A pause. Yes. Did you... My voice faltered. Did you hurt him? He stepped closer. Not yet. The honesty hit harder than any lie could have. I wanted to ask more, but something in his eyes, something dark, haunted, stopped me. He exhaled. You think I'm cruel? I think you're dangerous, I said. There's a difference. He almost smiled. Then you're learning. That afternoon, Rosa found me in the garden, pruning roses that weren't mine. She glanced around before speaking. Whatever you heard this morning, you should forget it. I can't, I whispered. She shook her head. Then remember this. The boss does what others can't, so people like you can sleep at night. Her words lingered long after she left. Protection and destruction, two sides of the same man. Night fell heavy and quick. I couldn't stop replaying that phone call, the chill in his tone, the ease with which he commanded power. It terrified me, but it also fascinated me, because that same voice had told me I was safe. Later, when he knocked softly on my door, I almost didn't answer. Almost. He leaned against the frame, shirt sleeves rolled, the faint scent of rain and smoke clinging to him. Can we talk? I nodded. He walked in, kept his distance. You saw a part of my world today, he said. The part I don't show to people who matter. Then why let me see it? Because lies are just slower poison, he said quietly. And I don't want to kill us with those. Us. The word slipped out so easily I wasn't sure he noticed. But I did. I took a breath. You think I can live in that world of yours? I think you already are, he replied. Every time you choose to stay, something broke open inside me then. A fragile understanding that safety with him would never mean innocence. It would mean acceptance of the darkness that protected me. He took one cautious step forward. I won't ask you to be okay with what I do, he said, only to understand why I do it. And if I can't, then you'll leave, and I'll let you. But his eyes said the opposite, and mine told the same lie back. The silence between us deepened, thick with everything neither of us wanted to admit. Then softly, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face. Barely a touch, but enough to make the world still. You deserve peace, he murmured, even if it has to live next to the things that keep it alive. He turned to go, stopped at the door. Sleep, Sophia. The city's quiet tonight, as if he hadn't been the reason why. When he was gone, I sat in the dark and finally understood the truth. I wasn't afraid of the things he did. I was afraid of how safe I felt knowing he'd do them for me. Every heart hides a shadow. Some learn to fight it, some learn to use it, and sometimes the only difference between a monster and a savior is who they protect. Peace never lasts long in a world built on secrets. It comes quietly, like a breath you don't realize you're holding, and it leaves just as quietly, before you even know you needed it. For a few days, the Moretti estate was silent. No phone calls, no threats, no ghosts from the past. I'd started to forget what fear felt like. That was my first mistake. It happened on a Thursday, the kind of day that pretends to be ordinary until it isn't. Rosa had gone into town. The guards were changing shifts, and I was in the garden again, trimming the roses that weren't mine, pretending that a life like this could ever belong to me. That's when I saw the envelope. Resting on the stone bench, perfectly placed, as if someone wanted it to be found. No name, no address, just a black wax seal, pressed with the shape of a serpent. My heartbeat tripped, because I'd seen that symbol before. Once, carved into a ring Damien wore the night he first raised his hand to me. I didn't open it. I ran. Inside, Alessandro was on the phone, his voice low but sharp, clipped Italian slicing through the air. The moment he saw me, he stopped. What happened? I held out the envelope. He took it, eyes narrowing as he broke the seal. The letter inside was short, just one line, written in red ink. She's not yours to protect. He folded it once, slid it into his pocket. Then his expression changed, from calm to something colder, something lethal. Go upstairs, he said quietly. Alessandro, now, Sophia. It wasn't a request. I did as he said, but I didn't close the door. From the landing, I could hear his voice, lower, rougher, all steel and fury. Find out who delivered it. A pause. Check the perimeter. No one comes in or out without my word. His men scattered, efficient and silent. But beneath that control, I could feel it. The current of danger tightening around us. When he finally came upstairs, his expression had softened, but his eyes hadn't. He stopped at the doorway, hands in his pockets, the storm barely contained beneath his calm. Someone wanted you to see that, he said. Damien. Maybe, but not just him. He exhaled slowly. There are people in this city who'd love to use you to get to me. I shook my head. Use me how? He hesitated. Then quietly. By hurting you, the words hit like ice. I wanted to speak, but my throat felt locked. All I could manage was, so what happens now? He stepped closer, voice firm. Now, you don't go anywhere without me. You don't open doors. You don't answer calls. And if anyone says my name, you come straight to me. It was a command, but it sounded like a promise. Do you understand? I nodded. But something in his tone told me this wasn't just about protection. It was about control. The line between the two was starting to blur. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered to the balcony, watching the city lights flicker far below. Somewhere out there, someone was watching me, and for the first time, I realized I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was leverage. Behind me, I heard him step outside. Barefoot, shirt unbuttoned halfway, the glow of his cigarette painting his face in soft golden shadow. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, I shouldn't have brought you here. I turned to him. You mean you regret it? His eyes found mine. No, it's not safe anymore. I smiled, bitter and quiet. It never was. He looked at me for a long moment, then crushed the cigarette beneath his heel. Tomorrow, he said, we go somewhere only I know. Running? I asked. No, he said, voice low, steady. Hunting. And in that instant, I understood the kind of man he truly was. Not the monster the city feared, but the one they should have. In his world, danger doesn't knock. It whispers first. And the moment you start to feel safe, that's when it decides to find you. They say the sea never keeps secrets. It pulls everything to the surface. The wreckage, the bones, the truth. That's where he took me. Away from the city, away from the noise, to a villa carved into the cliffs, where the wind smelled like salt and storms. For the first time, I saw Alessandro not as the man who ruled shadows, but as someone who was learning what silence felt like. The drive had been long. Hours of winding roads and unspoken words. He didn't look at me much, but I could feel him watching, even when he wasn't. He was memorizing me, or maybe guarding something he didn't want to lose. When we arrived, the world was nothing but ocean and wind. The villa stood like a secret between the cliffs, stone, glass, and solitude. It wasn't grand the way I expected. It was personal, worn in places, untouched in others. Like him. He opened the door and said simply, "This is where no one can find you." I should have felt safe. But safety isn't silence. It's trust. And I still wasn't sure we had that. The first night, the air was heavy with rain. He cooked. I watched, amazed at how something as ordinary as a man slicing bread could look like control. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his voice was softer. Less steel. More storm. "You keep looking at me like I'm about to disappear," he said once. I smiled faintly. "Maybe I am." He tilted his head. "You don't run anymore, Sophia." "No," I whispered, but I still hide. He didn't answer, just poured. The wine, the silence between us deepening, not empty, just heavy with things we weren't ready to say. That night, sleep didn't come easy. The ocean roared against the rocks, and somewhere in the darkness, I could hear him pacing. A lion caged by his own conscience. I walked to the terrace, barefoot, and there he was, staring at the sea like it owed him answers. "What are you thinking about?" I asked. He didn't turn. How every man I've killed thought he had a reason. I froze. "And you?" I asked softly. "Do you?" He turned then, slow, deliberate, and the look in his eyes was both confession and curse. "I had a rule," he said. "Never kill for pride, Never kill for pain. A pause. But then I met the man who hurt you. My heart stopped. Alessandro, I didn't touch him. Not yet. His jaw tightened. But if he tries again, I will. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to tell him he was no better than the monsters who haunted us. But the words never came. Because deep down, some quiet, broken part of me was relieved. Someone finally wanted to protect me. Without asking what I was worth, he stepped closer, voice a whisper against the night air. You think I'm dangerous. I know you are. Then why aren't you afraid? Because for the first time, I said, I know whose danger I belong to. He looked at me. Really looked. And in that silence, something changed. Not love. Not yet. But something heavier. Something that promised it. He reached out, brushed a strand of hair from my face. The touch was careful. Almost reverent. Sleep, he murmured. Tomorrow we start again. When he walked away, the sea swallowed the sound of his footsteps, and I stood there, alone, watching the waves break like truth against the rocks. Sometimes protection feels like prison, and sometimes prison feels like peace. But in his arms, I couldn't tell the difference anymore. For 3 days, the world pretended to be kind. The sea stayed calm. The air smelled like rosemary and rain. And for a while, I almost believed we'd outrun the past. Almost. There's a rhythm to fear. You start to forget its shape, its sound. Then it reminds you, sharply, suddenly, without mercy. It began with the dogs. 2 of them. Trained, loyal, quiet. They never barked. Not unless something was wrong. That morning, they wouldn't stop. Alessandro was in the study, phone pressed to his ear, the faint echo of Italian curses rolling through the halls. I came down barefoot, the floor cold beneath my feet, my heart already tight. He looked up the moment I entered. His eyes, sharp, focused, shifted from me to the window behind me. Then he said one word, down. Before I could ask, glass shattered. The sound of gunfire tore through the stillness. Brutal, quick, efficient. Like the city had followed us here, dragging every secret behind it. He grabbed me, pulling me to the floor, covering me with his body as bullets splintered the walls. I could feel the heat of his breath, the weight of his heartbeat pounding against my back. Then silence, and in that silence, the faint sound of footsteps outside. He stood, gun already drawn. Stay here, he ordered. But fear makes you reckless, and love, even the beginning of it, makes you stupid. I'm not hiding, I whispered. He turned, anger flashing in his eyes. This isn't a game, Sophia. Neither was my life before you, I shot back. The words hit something inside him. A nerve, a scar, maybe both. Then his voice changed. Lower, softer. Then stay close. We moved through the villa like shadows, his hand steady on my back, his presence both shield and warning. Outside, the wind screamed through the cliffs, and through it, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in months. Sophia! Damien. The name ripped through me. The man who'd once broken me now stood at the edge of the courtyard, smirking, alive, fearless. His suit soaked from the rain, his eyes burning with something between triumph and madness. Come back, baby, he called. I just want to talk. Alessandro stepped forward, gun raised. You have 3 seconds to leave. Damien laughed, a sound too loud, too confident. You think she belongs to you? You're just another man she'll ruin. I felt something inside me snap, a quiet, fierce thing I didn't know I still had. I stepped out from behind Alessandro. Enough, Damien. He blinked, stunned that I spoke. Look at you, he said slowly. New clothes, new man, new name, but you're still the same broken thing I left behind. The words should have hurt. They didn't, because beside me stood a man who'd seen my scars and didn't flinch. I took a step forward. No, Damien, I said softly. You didn't leave me broken. You just taught me how to rebuild differently. His smirk faltered. And then, in that breath between fury and realization, Alessandro fired. 1 bullet, clean, controlled, into the ground by Damien's feet. Next one, Alessandro said. Won't miss. Damien staggered back, eyes wide, mask cracking. Then he spat into the rain and disappeared into the dark. For a long time, there was nothing. Just the sound of thunder rolling across the sea. Alessandro lowered the gun, eyes never leaving the horizon. Then slowly, he turned to me. "You shouldn't have stepped out," he said. "I had to." He studied me, something like pride flickering behind his anger. "You're not afraid of him anymore." "No," I said quietly. "I'm afraid of what I'll become if I am." He nodded once. And in that fragile, dangerous calm, we both understood something unspoken. This wasn't over. It was only beginning. They say the past always finds you. But when it did, I realized I wasn't running anymore. I was ready to fight. After the storm, the sea always looks cleaner. But it's a lie. The water only hides the wreckage deeper. The morning after Damien vanished into the rain, the villa was silent again. Too silent. The kind of quiet that hums with something unfinished. Alessandro was in the study, his phone pressed to his ear again, his voice a low, controlled current of orders. I didn't ask who he was speaking to. I already knew it wasn't good. When he finally looked up, his expression said everything his words didn't. Something had shifted. Something was coming. "Damien didn't come alone," he said simply. I froze. "What do you mean?" He rubbed his temple, the faintest crack in his composure. "He had help. From people who should have been untouchable." The words landed like stones in my chest. Untouchable. In his world, that could mean only one thing. Someone inside his own circle. He looked at me then, quietly, deeply. "Someone sold information about you, Sophia. About where you were. About us." My breath caught. "Why me?" He hesitated, then stepped closer. "There's something I never told you." And just like that, the world tilted. He walked to the window, his reflection fractured in the glass. When Damien was still in the city, he wasn't just some jealous man. He was working with them, the Serpentine Ring. I frowned. "The people who sent the letter?" He nodded. "They deal in power, in money, in blood. But lately they've been dealing in something else. People. Information. Secrets." He turned toward me, his voice quieter now. "And you, Sophia, you weren't just some random name on their list." I took a step back. "What are you saying?" He exhaled slowly, the truth dragging itself out of him like a wound reopening. "They were watching me, trying to find a weakness. You were the one person they couldn't trace, until Damien." My heart sank. "You mean—" "I was bait." He closed his eyes. "Not to me. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But belief is fragile, and love built on danger always cracks first." "So all of this," I said, my voice trembling. "The villa, the protection, the secrecy. It wasn't just about keeping me safe." His eyes met mine, sharp and pleading. "It was about keeping you alive." Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. I could hear the ocean again, crashing below us, like it was mocking my heartbeat. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because once you know the truth," he said softly, "you can't ever go back to not knowing." I turned away, gripping the edge of the table just to keep from falling. All this time I thought I was healing, but maybe I was just hiding in someone else's war. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded distant. "So what happens now?" He stepped closer, cautious. "We end it. Before they come again?" I shook my head. "You mean you end it, alone?" His jaw clenched. "That's the only way." "No," I whispered. "That's your way." He stared at me then, something like admiration flickering through his anger. "You're stronger than—" "Maybe," I said. "But I'm tired of being everyone's reason for revenge." I walked out before he could answer, out into the storm still lingering at the edge of the cliffs. The wind was cold, wild, honest, the kind that doesn't lie to you. And for a long moment I stood there. Not Alessandro's protected secret, not Damien's past mistake, just me. They all wanted to claim me, the abuser, the savior, the world between them. But somewhere between fear and freedom, I found something none of them expected. Myself. There's a sound a heart makes when it decides to stop being afraid. It isn't loud, it's a whisper, like a blade sliding free. That was the sound inside me the night he left. Alessandro didn't say where he was going, But he didn't have to. I saw it in his eyes, the kind of stillness men carry before they step into war. He kissed my forehead, said, "Stay inside. Lock the doors." Then he was gone. But fear has a way of turning obedience into fire. And I was done being the reason someone else bled. The villa's halls felt hollow as I followed him. The guards didn't stop me. Maybe they saw the look in my eyes. Or maybe Alessandro had already taught them what happened to anyone who tried. I found his car gone. The rain starting again. The smell of salt and smoke mixing in the air. So I took another, one of his. The engine roared to life like it already knew where to go. The road twisted down toward the city, the cliffs flashing by like broken film. Every mile took me closer to the world he never wanted me to see. His world. When I reached the docks, it was almost dawn. Gray light, empty streets, the hum of ships. And there, beneath an old warehouse sign, his car. I killed the engine, stepped out, and hid behind a stack of crates slick with rain. Then I heard it, voices, Alessandro's, low, measured. Another, rough, mocking, the serpentine ring. I peeked through the gaps in the metal. 5 men armed, one of them older, his suit immaculate, his smile venom. "You're bleeding loyalty for a woman who was never yours," he said. Alessandro didn't flinch. "She was never yours to touch," the older man chuckled. "Everything in the city is mine to touch." That was when I saw it. A phone in the older man's hand, a picture on the screen. Me, standing on the cliffs outside the villa, a sniper's red mark glowing faintly over my shoulder. My breath caught. They'd found me again. Alessandro's hand moved toward his gun. "Take one more step," he warned, "and you'll never breathe another lie." But the older man smiled, cruel and patient. "You're not here to kill me, boy. You're here to protect her, and you can't do both." The shot came from somewhere unseen. A crack of thunder, a flash of heat. He staggered, not Alessandro, but the man beside him. Blood sprayed the wet pavement, and chaos broke open like glass. I didn't think. I ran, out from hiding, across the rain-slicked dock, shouting his name. He turned, eyes wide, fury and fear colliding. "Sophia!" The next bullet hit the crate behind me, splintering wood. He grabbed me, dragging me behind cover. "What the hell are you doing here? I couldn't let you do this alone. This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is." Our eyes locked, 2 storms meeting in the same sky. Then he sighed, pulled a knife from his boot, and pressed it into my hand. "If they reach us, you run. You don't look back." "Not a chance," I said. He almost smiled even through the madness. "You really are mine now." Another explosion, closer this time. The smell of burning oil, the scream of men dying for power they didn't understand. And then, like it had started, it ended. The gunfire faded. The older man was gone. Just smoke, silence, and the sound of the sea rising with the tide. Alessandro's hand found mine, rough, trembling. "You disobeyed me. I saved you." He looked at me for a long time, rain sliding down his face like tears neither of us would admit to. Then he said quietly, "Maybe that's the problem. You're starting to save me from myself." He pulled me close, and for the first time since I met him, he didn't look like a king. He looked like a man standing on the edge of his own ruin, and choosing to fall anyway. Some truths don't set you free. They just change the kind of cage you live in. And when I followed him into the dark, I realized freedom was never what I wanted. I wanted him. There's something cruel about silence. After gunfire, it feels too soft, too calm. Like the world is holding its breath, waiting to see who's still alive. We drove back before sunrise. The air between us was thick, not with words, but with the weight of everything we hadn't said. He had blood on his sleeve. Not his, but it still wouldn't wash off. He kept both hands on the wheel, jaw locked, eyes fixed on the road. When the villa came into view, I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt dread. The gates were open. The lights off. The guards gone. Something inside me whispered before my mouth could. "They were here." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We stepped out of the car. The gravel crunched under our boots, and with every step toward the front door, the wind seemed to carry pieces of the past. The door hung slightly open. Inside, the air was wrong. Still, too cold. Like the house was holding a secret it didn't want to tell. "Stay behind me," Alessandro said quietly. But I didn't, because I already knew what I would find. The living room was wrecked. Chairs overturned. Glass shattered. The smell of gunpowder still clinging to the curtains. And then, a sound. A faint broken whimper from the corner. Rosa, I ran to her. Her hand was bleeding, her face pale, her voice shaking. "They came looking for you," she whispered. "They knew your name, your face, everything." My throat tightened. "Who?" She looked at Alessandro, then at me. "The ring, but they weren't alone." His expression hardened. "Who else?" She hesitated, and then the words fell like a blade. "Someone from your house, Alessandro. One of your own." The silence that followed was unbearable. He stood there, unmoving, like marble carved in fury. I could see it in his eyes. The betrayal, the calculation, the quiet rage waiting to break free. Finally, he spoke. "Get her out of here." "Alessandro." "Now, Sophia." But this time, I didn't listen, because I saw something in his face I hadn't seen before. Not the man who protected me. Not the man who wanted to save me. But the man who would burn the world just to make it fair again. He moved through the villa like a ghost, checking each room, each hallway, each trace of what had been taken. When he returned, his voice was steady. "Too steady. They know where we are. They know who you are. They won't stop now." I stepped closer, refusing to look away. "Then what do we do?" He looked at me for a long time, like he was memorizing me again. This might be the last time he'd get to. "We disappear," he said softly. "Completely." Something inside me broke. "Disappear where?" He brushed a strand of hair from my face, where even God forgets to look. His touch lingered, gentle, possessive, desperate. And for a moment, I thought he might kiss me. But instead, he whispered, "They didn't come for revenge, Sophia. They came for ownership." I frowned. "Ownership?" He hesitated, then said the words that made my world tilt again. "They think you belong to them." My heart stopped. "Why?" "Because your father," he said quietly, "was one of them." The world went still. The ocean outside seemed to pause mid-breath. "No," I whispered. "He was dead. My father, he nodded. He was. But before he died, he left something behind. Something they want, and they think you have it." I stumbled back, shaking my head. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was quiet. "Because until tonight, I didn't know." And then, for the first time since I met him, Alessandro looked scared. Not for himself, for me. Sometimes the past doesn't chase you to punish you. It chases you to claim what it believes it owns. And that night I realized I wasn't running from danger anymore. I was the danger. There are truths you spend your whole life running from, and when they finally catch you, they don't scream, they whisper. That whisper came at dawn. A single knock on the library door, and Alessandro's voice, low, restrained. "Come in." He stood by the window again, hands clasped behind his back, the ocean behind him glowing pale gold. For a heartbeat, he looked like peace. But peace doesn't wear a gun. He turned, eyes fixed on me. "You deserve to know everything." I didn't sit. I couldn't. He reached into his coat and placed a small file on the desk. Yellowed paper, a faded photograph clipped to the top. My father's face. The room shrank around me. Every breath felt like a betrayal. "His name wasn't what you thought," Alessandro said quietly. "He was born Adrian Costa, founding member of the Serpentine Ring. He built the network they still use today. Smuggling routes, coded ledgers, the whole machine." My pulse stuttered. "No. My father was a mechanic. He fixed cars. He shook his head. That's what he wanted you to believe. Before he died, he went rogue, stole something from the ring. Something worth more than money, a ledger, a key. No one knows where he hid it." I stared at the photograph. My father's smile. The same eyes I saw in the mirror every day. "And they think I know where it is?" "Yes," I laughed, bitter and hollow. "They're wrong." "Maybe," he said. "But they'll kill to be sure." He stepped closer. "I was ordered to find you long before we met." The world tilted again. I took a step back. "What?" "I didn't know it was you," he said quickly. "They only told me to track the daughter of Adrian Costa, to bring her in alive." The word hit like a knife with a smile. "So you were part of this," I whispered, at first. His eyes hardened. "Then I found you. You weren't what they said you'd be. You weren't a pawn. You were—" He stopped himself, the word he wouldn't say hanging heavy in the air. I turned away. The sea below looked endless, the kind of blue that promised escape and meant nothing. "So this," I said softly, "the dinners, the villa, the protection. It all started as an assignment." His silence was answer enough. I felt something inside me fracture. Not loudly, just cleanly. like glass in cold water. He came closer. I tried to end the contract when I realized what they wanted. I thought if I hid you, if I kept you close, they'd lose interest. I laughed again, softer this time. You don't hide a secret by falling in love with it, Alessandro, he flinched. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. He said quietly, I didn't plan for you. I faced him then, tears burning but unfallen. No one ever does. For a moment, the world held still. Just two people, surrounded by ghosts they hadn't buried. Then his phone buzzed on the table, breaking the spell. He answered without looking away from me. Speak. A pause. His expression changed. Cold again. Professional. They have a name, he said into the receiver. Another pause. His jaw tightened. Where? A longer silence, and then, send me everything. No mistakes. He hung up slowly. They found someone who might know where the ledger is, he said. Someone close to your father. Who? He met my eyes. Your mother. The air left my lungs. My mother died when I was 6. He shook his head. That's what you were told. The world blurred. The walls seemed to move. No. She can't. She's alive, he said, voice low, unsteady. And she's working with them. The words hit harder than any bullet. Because in that instant, I understood. Every road, every loss, every lie had been leading here. To blood, to betrayal, to the truth I was never supposed to survive. Some families leave you inheritance. Mine left me a war, and as I looked at Alessandro, I realized love and betrayal sometimes wear the same face. They say the dead stay silent, but sometimes they just wait for the right moment to speak. For years I carried a grave inside me. It had my mother's name carved into it, cold, unchangeable, final. And now Alessandro was telling me she'd never been in it at all. He stood across the room, voice steady, eyes uncertain. The serpentine ring kept her hidden. They used her to track your father's movements. When he ran, she disappeared too. My throat tightened. She left me. She was forced. No, I said, sharper now, because the truth hurt more when it was soft. She made a choice. She let me think she was gone. He stepped closer, careful, like I was a wound he didn't want to reopen but couldn't stay away from. She's been using an alias. Clara Voss. She resurfaced in Venice 2 months ago, and now the ring wants a meeting. I stared at him, the name echoing like a ghost. Do you trust her? He didn't answer. That silence said everything. The flight to Venice was quiet, too quiet for the thoughts screaming in my head. Every mile closer felt like walking backward through time. By the time we reached the villa overlooking the lagoon, I couldn't tell if I was shaking from fear or fury. Alessandro's men surrounded the perimeter. He briefed them in clipped Italian. I barely listened. My mind was trapped in a memory. A kitchen that smelled like lemon and soap, a woman humming an old lullaby, hands warm, voice gentle. That woman was gone. What waited inside was a stranger wearing her face. She was standing by the window when I walked in. Tall, poised, her hair streaked with silver. Her eyes, my eyes. Hello, Sophia. Her voice was calm, smooth, as if we'd just been apart for days, not decades. I wanted to run to her. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said the only thing that made sense. You're alive. Her smile barely moved. Alive, but not living. The words cut through me. Why? I whispered. Why let me think you were dead? She turned away. Your father made enemies, dangerous men. If they thought he left a weakness, they'd use it. So he hid you and you vanished, I said, bitterness sharp in my throat. You let a child bury you. Tears gathered in her eyes, but they didn't fall. I did what I had to protect you. I laughed softly. Is that what this is? Protection? Working for the same men who hunted him? She flinched. They promised they'd leave you alone. And you believed them? Silence. Behind me, I felt Alessandro's presence. Still, watchful, ready. He was giving me space, but I could sense the tension coiling in him. You don't understand what they can do, my mother said. You think you've seen power, Sophia? The ring built empires before you were born. They don't forget. I stepped closer, voice trembling. Then maybe it's time someone made them remember who they should fear. Her eyes flicked to Alessandro. And this is the man you think will protect you? Alessandro's voice was low but steady. She doesn't need my protection. She needs the truth. My mother's gaze hardened. The truth gets people killed. Lies do it faster, I said. Something broke between us then. A line drawn years ago, finally crossed. she sighed, weary. Your father hid the ledger somewhere only I knew. The ring wants it. They think it's a weapon. But it's worse. My pulse quickened. What is it? A list, she said quietly, of everyone who ever bought silence. Every politician, every cop, every priest who took blood money to look the other way. Alessandro's jaw clenched. If that list goes public, it'll burn cities, she finished, and they'll kill us all to stop it. Outside, thunder rolled across the lagoon, like a warning from the sky itself. I looked at her, this woman who gave me life and took it away. There were too many questions, too much pain. But beneath it all, there was something else, a single, fragile truth I couldn't deny. I still loved her. Even if she'd ruined everything, she reached out, trembling fingers brushing my cheek. I never stopped watching you, she whispered. I never stopped praying you'd stay invisible. I swallowed hard. Well, I'm not invisible anymore. Her eyes filled with tears. I can see that. We think we want the truth, but the truth doesn't set you free. It chains you to everything you tried to forget. And as I stood there facing the woman I once called mother, I realized some resurrections are worse than death. They say peace comes before the storm, but that's not true. Peace is the storm, quiet, heavy, waiting to break you from the inside. That's what Venice felt like. Still air, silent streets, a promise of something I couldn't name. We were supposed to meet with her contacts at dusk, a small cafe by the water, the kind of place where lovers meet, not ghosts. Alessandro didn't like it. I could see it in the way he scanned the reflections in the glass, how his hand brushed the edge of his gun. Casual, but never relaxed. Stay close, he said softly. I always do. He gave me that look again, the one that said you're the only mistake I'd make twice. Inside, the cafe smelled of rain and old espresso. The owner nodded, nervous, and led us to a table near the back. My mother sat across from me, her face half in shadow. She looked smaller now, like the weight of her secrets was finally crushing her. They're coming, she whispered. They know I told you. Before I could speak, the first shot shattered the window. Time didn't stop. It exploded. Glass rained like fire. People screamed. Alessandro was already moving, gun drawn, eye sharp, voice cold. Down. He pulled me beneath the table, his arm shielding my head as another round tore through the wood. Outside, engines roared. Black cars, men in suits. The serpentine ring had found us. My mother grabbed my wrist. They'll kill us both if we stay. There's a boat. She didn't finish. The next bullet took her. It wasn't cinematic. It wasn't slow. It was just real. A sound, a shock, a body hitting the ground. I screamed, but Alessandro dragged me back before I could reach her. Her blood was already spreading, a dark bloom across white marble. Move, he shouted. He fired twice, clean, controlled, 2 men down before they hit the floor. We ran. Through the kitchen, through the back door, into the rain-soaked alley. The air stank of metal and fear. I could barely see. Every footstep felt like it echoed through eternity. Alessandro grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the docks. She said there's a boat, he said. If she wasn't lying. She wasn't, I choked out. She wouldn't. His eyes flicked to mine, dark and unreadable. Then let's hope love still means something. The boat was there, barely afloat, old wood, peeling paint, but it was enough. He started the engine while I fired back at the shadows chasing us. Hands shaking. Heart splitting, but eyes steady. The motor coughed to life. We pushed off just as another wave of bullets tore through the dock. Rain hit hard, mixing with the spray of salt and blood. I looked back. The cafe was burning now, orange flames swallowing everything that ever was. My mother, her secrets, my past, gone in one beautiful, terrible inferno. The boat sped through the canals, engines screaming, the world blurring into noise and light. Alessandro shouted over the wind, "They won't stop. The list's still out there. If your father hid it, they'll come for you until they find it." I met his gaze, wet hair clinging to his face, eyes burning through the storm. "Then let them come," I said. "I'm done running." He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. That single nod meant more than 1,000 promises. It meant war. Hours later, we anchored near the outskirts of the city. The rain had stopped. The world was quiet again. Too quiet. Alessandro sat beside me on the deck, hands still trembling. "You lost everything," he said softly. I shook my head. "No, not everything." He looked at me, and I saw it in his eyes. He didn't believe he deserved the word everything, so I said it for both of us. "You're still here." "That's enough," he exhaled, long and rough. His hand brushed mine, not possession, not protection, just connection. For a moment, the world didn't feel cruel, just tired. They thought taking everything would break me. But pain doesn't destroy people, it reshapes them. And as the fire behind us faded into the sea, I realized something new. I wasn't his weakness anymore. I was his weapon. Every story ends the same way. Not with victory, not with peace, but with silence. The kind that comes after the gunfire. After the heart stops racing, when you realize you're still alive. We reached the mainland at dawn. Venice glimmered behind us like a dying ember. Alessandro's men were already waiting, the few still loyal after the ring's betrayal. The plan was simple. Walk into hell, burn it from the inside. The Serpentine Ring's headquarters rose from the cliffs like a cathedral of sin. Marble, glass, and ghosts. Every secret of the underworld hid inside those walls. Every man who ever called himself untouchable was waiting. I'd spent years being their victim. Today I'd be their reckoning. We entered through the service tunnels. Wet stone, dripping pipes, the smell of rot and gasoline. Alessandro moved ahead of me, gun steady, voice low. Stay behind me. I almost smiled. After everything, you still think I'll listen? He glanced back, and for the first time in days, his mouth curved just slightly. Worth a try. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, the ring's council room. Men in tailored suits turned as we entered. Their faces didn't show fear, just annoyance, as if we'd interrupted a meeting. At the head of the table stood him, Don Silvani, the last serpent, the man who'd ordered my father's death. Well, he drawled, the lost daughter returns. I stepped forward. You killed my father for trying to expose you. He smiled. He was naive. Truth is just another currency, and now his little girl thinks she can spend it better? I slid the drive across the table. The ledger. Every name. Every deal. Every life you bought. His smile faltered. He reached for the drive. But Alessandro's voice cut through the room like thunder. Touch it, and the world will see everything you've buried. Dozens of guns were drawn. Ours were already up. For a heartbeat, the world balanced on a breath. Then the breath broke. Bullets tore through the silence. The chamber erupted in chaos. Marble shattering, glass exploding, men shouting orders that came too late. Alessandro moved like a storm. Controlled, lethal, beautiful in the way only death can be. I stayed at his side, my own shots finding targets I didn't know I could hit. When it was over, the room was smoke and silence. Bodies lay like discarded chess pieces. Only Don Silvani remained, wounded but standing. He sneered. You think killing me ends it? No, I said softly. But it's a start. I pressed the button on my phone. A signal. Far away, servers awakened, sending the ledger to every major network in Europe. The truth was free now. Wild, unstoppable, unforgiving. Silvani's smile collapsed. You doomed us all. No, I whispered. I saved us. He lunged for me. A single shot stopped him. Alessandro's. Always his. The sun was rising when we walked out. The villa behind us burned. A monument to every secret the world could no longer hide. I looked at Alessandro. Smoke clung to his hair, blood streaked his sleeve, but his eyes were clear. It's over, I said. He shook his head. Nothing's ever over. But maybe now, it can begin. For a long moment, we just stood there. Two survivors of different wars, who'd somehow ended up in the same one. He reached for my hand, not as a command, as a question. I took it. The ocean roared below, and for the first time it didn't sound like grief. It sounded like freedom. They called him the Mafia boss. They called me the broken girl. But power doesn't belong to those who take lives. It belongs to those who survive them. Love didn't save us. It made us dangerous. And when the ashes settled, the world finally saw the truth. We weren't the monsters they feared. We were the fire that burned them clean. They said she'd never rise again. They said he'd never change. But some people are born from ruin, and some are remade in it. She wasn't the same woman they tried to break. He wasn't the same man the world feared. Together, they became something else. A warning. A legend. A love written in fire. When her past came to kill her, she didn't hide behind his name. She stood beside it. And the world finally learned, standing beside a mafia boss isn't about belonging to him. It's about becoming untouchable yourself. In the end, there were no heroes. No saviors, only two souls who refused to die quietly. So when they tell their stories about monsters and men, they'll whisper her name too, not as a victim, but as the storm that ended them, because she was never just the woman beside the Mafia boss. She was the reason he became human. And the reason the world burned clean. Sofia Moretti, the girl who walked through hell, and came back wearing its crown. They thought breaking her would be easy. They thought power belonged only to men who wore suits and carried guns, but she proved them wrong. Because when love met vengeance, it didn't whisper. It roared. She stood beside the Mafia boss, not as a possession, but as his equal, and the world finally learned. You can't destroy a woman who's already walked through hell. Her story wasn't about survival. It was about rebirth, fire, freedom, and the kind of love that makes even the devil step aside. Because she was never just a name in his shadow. She was the shadow, and the light that burned through it. This was her story. Her war, her revenge. Subscribe now to BRD Stories Hub, where every love burns and every scar tells a story. BRD Stories Hub, where darkness meets desire.